Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me thank the President and the Council of the College for inviting me to deliver this speech, and I thank the chairpersons for that kind introduction. So, I'll be talking on how to publish a high-impact paper. So, obviously, this is not going to be a prescriptive model or a cookbook algorithm as to how to publish a high-impact paper. What I'll be doing rather is to share my experiences with you and expertise with you. So, I would like to propose this conceptual framework and a working model to publish a high impact paper. So, this will be the impact of your paper depends on how you conduct the study, the conducting stage. There I would classify it to the area, selecting the area of research and the scientific merit of the study within the area that you select. Now, after conducting the research, we come to the writing and publishing stage where writing the paper includes the content and the style of the paper, which is closely linked with the publication process, and then comes the post-publication publicity that you give after you get the publication. So, first coming into the subject area of research. So, this picture shows the top 100 publications, papers based on their citation count. So, what you see is medicine is in the mix. The top papers are basically lab methods papers, obviously, as you can understand. But medicine, psychiatry, medical statistics are in the mix. Now, if you look at the subject area of medicine, for example, disciplines like general medicine, cancer research have a wide readership, and the journals are generally of high impact factor. Now, at the other end, where you have a narrow readership and the impact factors tend to be rather bit low, for example, disciplines like toxicology, forensic medicine, and my discipline, clinical neurophysiology, disciplines like that. So, that does not mean that areas are rather inferior, but basically the readership is narrow, the impact factor would be a little low. So, I would say endocrinology would be sitting somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, in between the two ends. Now, the scientific merit of the study, Professor Senaka Rajapaksha in fact highlighted many of these areas. So, what I want to show is, now the scientific merit of a study can be expressed in two main orthogonal domains, the scientific rigor of the study and the novelty. So, the best research then is the ones that are high in scientific rigor, as he described the different levels of evidence, and those who are novel. So, if the science is poor, obviously that is not scientific research. Then even if there is novelty, if there is no science in it, they would amount to, one might call them fiction. So, even if the scientific rigor is high, if you are doing something that had already been done, that is just repetition. So, if you want to publish a high impact paper, what you need to target is the end of the spectrum. Now, going into the main part of my talk, now writing a high impact paper, now the editors of the journals, high-end researchers, reviewers all agree that the impact of a paper is determined by its content, but not only by the content, but the style of writing as well. Now, if you look at the content, the high impact research and the papers arising therefrom are novel, and they pose an important research question. By doing so, they make a significant conceptual advancement in the field. So, in order to achieve that, obviously the studies will have to have a good science in it. So, they have tight study designs, they use appropriate and most suitable data analysis technique and reporting methods to test the hypothesis, and the discussions are driven by the data produced in the research. Now, obviously the content of your study or your paper depends largely on predetermined largely based on at the conduction stage of the study. But again, as the previous speaker spoke, now checking your manuscript when you write against the guidelines, reporting guidelines help you to improve the content of the paper. You might like to, if you have conducted a randomized control trial, you might like to check it with the consort guidelines. If it is an observation study, you might like to check the paper with the Strobe guidelines. So, Equator Network, as he said, is the point where you start this to access all these papers that describe the guidelines. Now, when it comes to style, before we start writing the manuscript, we should select the target journal. The first thing is we should remember is never to publish in predatory journals. You will be bombarded with different number of emails asking you to publish in their journals, but a good guide to detect predatory and suspicious journals is this website from the Yale Library. And once you find a particular journal that you think is suitable, you might like to go through the aims and scope of the journals, which will give the kind of readership that you are going to access. The author instructions about the types of articles, word count, referencing style, and so on. And you also might like to check the ranking of the journal within the subject area. As I said earlier, impact factor itself does not give the full picture, because your subject area is such that you should check the particular journal that you are selecting with the other journals in the subject area. So, SCImago website would be a good one. So, this picture shows the journal is neurology with a good H index, and the subject area is medicine, and the subcategory is clinical neurology. So, if you click the clinical neurology button, you will get the articles that the journals listed according to their ranking. And if you, before finalizing on the journal, go through the related papers of the journal, so that it will give you the idea how these related papers are styled, and which type of writing the editors would prefer to publish in their journals. Now, when I got the invitation to do this presentation, I did some homework. So, what I did was, I selected a subset of papers that I published in non-open access journals. I exclude the ones that I published in PLOS One and so on. And these are the papers that I published as a corresponding author and the principal author. So, the submission decision and the main sort of part of writing was mine. So, I plotted in the x-axis the impact factor of the journal, and the y-axis the mean citation, number of citations per rate. So, if the impact factor of journal completely predicts the impact of your paper, everything would be lying on this particular line that I have drawn. So, if the impact factor is 4, I would get about 4 citations per year, although not strictly speaking that the definition of the impact factor is. But however, you can see marked departations from this type of pattern. So, for example, the one that you see here at the bottom is a first quartile journal in the ranking with the high impact factor in the discipline, but the citation rate was low, unfortunately. As opposed to this one at the top, unfortunately this I cannot show it, but you can see it in the top left corner. Right? It's a quarter one journal, first quartile journal with moderate impact factor, and the citation rate is high. So, impact factor does not always predict what is going to happen to your paper once it is published. Now, when it comes to the content of the paper, most of the editors, the readers would go through the title. For example, when they do PubMed search, they would go through the title, and they would only few people would select click the title and start reading the abstract. So, this means the title should catch the attention of the readership, and if you are pitching your paper to a group of clinicians, your title should highlight the clinical importance, important clinical findings of your study. And if you are targeting a group of scientists, you might like to include the methodological advancement or the new understanding that you get from that you give through the paper. So, whatever the audience is, you need to understand the title must be a condensed, short, single phrase that describes preferably the main finding of the study. For example, this title that I got from the last issue of the Journal of Endocrinology. So, the title is Adrenalectome Impairs Insulin-Induced Hypophagia and Related Hypothalamic Changes. This is an animal study, but basically they describe the main finding of their study, which is uncovering certain mechanisms, obviously targeting the scientist, as well as which has a clinical importance when it comes to human studies somewhere in the later stage. Do not ask questions in the title of the original research papers in a specific area. Obviously, this is a general talk, so the talk is how to publish a high impact paper, but this is a general topic. But when your target is a specific audience, do not pose a question. If you are writing a review again, that should be okay. So, the Nature Group editors would say, what their understanding is, they would say, you publish an original research article to answer a question, not to ask a question. And then again, don't use words like the study of, investigation into, and so on. These are, they would say, these are rather boring additions which does not say much, it does not have much substance. Then some people who read the title go on and start reading the abstract. So, before going into the details, I would like to put this beautiful quote in front of you by Mark Twain. He says, I didn't have time to write a short letter, So I wrote the long one instead. So this summarizes the basic idea of writing an abstract. You have to pay much attention and much concentration and time to condense all your important findings and your story into 250 words or so. So what we need to do is to state the problem and the aim, state the study design succinctly and the methodology using active verbs, present the most important results, and conclude by demonstrating the broader impact of the findings of the study. And these days when you submit the article online, the editors want you to submit 3 to 5 keywords, for example. So make sure that you select your keywords carefully, because what will happen is in the future, if a future researcher would access a database like PubMed, and if they search for keywords, your keywords should also be included in his search, so that your article will be extracted by them, and it is likely that it will get cited and carry a greater visibility in the long run. So I will present an example of a paper that we published some time ago, show some of the strengths and weaknesses. So I will go through it. The background, we start with the background. Use of psychotropic drugs is known to impair driving and increase the risk of road traffic accidents. They are the most common drugs taken in overdose in hospital-treated episodes of self-poisoning. So we set the background and we post the uncertainty. Most patients who take psychotropic drug overdoses are discharged within 48 hours, while they still have possible subclinical effects of these drugs. So the objective was to determine whether patients with psychotropic drug overdose are at a higher risk of a traffic accident in the period following discharge compared to a control period which was not associated with hospital-treated drug overdose. And we also have given the study design, which is a self-controlled case series design, which was new at the time. This type of analysis was done in 2004. So we wanted to include that also there. In the results, compared with the corresponding control period, the risk of a traffic accident was 3.5 times higher in the immediate period. We defined the immediate period, that was 3 days following exposure. 1.9 times higher during the intermediate period, and 1.6 times higher in the extended period, that was 7 days and 28 days respectively. And we have within parentheses we have given the effect size, confidence intervals, and the significance levels. So we concluded self-poisoning with psychotropic drugs is associated with markedly increased risk of a traffic accident during the first few days following discharge. And then we present the broader implications, indicating that these findings raise clinical and medical legal implications concerning fitness to drive during the period. And the title we selected at the time was The Risk of Road Traffic Accidents in Patients Discharged Following Treatment for Psychotropic Drug Overdose, a self-controlled case series study in Australia. Now looking back, I think this is a rather long title. We could have directly said that the patient with psychotropic drug overdose are at a higher risk of traffic accident, or something, the basically main finding. So it is, I would say it is not a very good title to go by. Now when it comes to the body of the manuscript, we must remember essentially we are telling a story in our paper. So that is why I think I agree with the previous speaker. It is not jumbling statistics and presenting everything in statistics. Statistics is used to tell the story, to quantify our story, to make it objective. So it has, if you want to have a high impact, it has to be a compelling story. And we style the story again according to the intended readership. So if you are pitching it to a scientist, our story is about uncovering pathophysiological mechanisms. If the readership is clinicians, we want to highlight the clinical implications. Now, however compelling our story is, the publishers and the editors want us to tell the story in minimum number of pages possible, because they value the number of pages. Now, body of the part of the manuscript is the figures, and figures are used either to summarize and or tell something that cannot be told in words effectively. So again, I will take this particular example from the article that is in press now. So what we did here was, we got a prospective cohort of patients who has taken organophosphate pesticide as a mode of self-harm. Different types of formulations are given in different lines. And we wanted to see what is the percentage of people going into respiratory failure after ingesting these pesticides. Obviously, you can see some of them, about 60% of them went into respiratory failure with this purple line. And some of them with green line, the pesticide is chlorpyrifos, only smaller percentage went into that. But also we wanted to show the pattern of development of respiratory failure over time. So the top line you can see many of the patients who develop respiratory failure do so within the first few hours following overdose, as opposed to the red line where the people who develop respiratory failure, patients who develop respiratory failure over the first 24 hours or so. So, we wanted to show the pattern and the fraction. This is like more like a survival curve, and the thickness of the line indicates the number of patients in each group. So, it is very difficult to present this type of information in a paragraph, and it will not be very effective. You cannot give it in a table either very effectively. Then the tables. Now, when we prepare the tables, we should include enough details in the table, such as the subject, patient counts, confidence intervals, and so on, so that the future researchers can, those who do, for example, do meta-analysis, can access this data, so that there's a chance that they will include your paper, because it gives this information to calculate the Pool's odds ratios or something. That will give them this information, so that they might include your paper in the meta-analysis, so that through that future researchers who read the meta-analysis can access your paper as a secondary or the original source. So, this is how you can increase your visibility. If you are publishing a medical paper, you should report the effect sizes. P-values are not enough. Statistical significance is not enough. I have seen many of such presentations in the abstract presentation session. People are very much concerned about the p-value, not the effect size. So, the effect size has to be understood by the clinicians, like the odds ratios, risk ratios, number needed to treat if it is a clinical trial, and so on. And if possible, interpret the effect size in a way that an educated layperson can understand. For this table is one table from the abstract that I showed you in that paper. So, the first row shows that in the first 3 days following overdose, patients were 3.5 times more likely to meet with a traffic accident. Incident rate ratio was 3.5 times. What does this mean in day-to-day terms? So, in the discussion we write, a 3.5-fold rise in accident risk is equivalent to the risk associated with a blood alcohol level of 0.09 grams per deciliter, nearly double the legal limit for driving, which is 0.05 grams per deciliter in the state where we conducted the study in New South Wales, Australia. Now, anybody who, educated layperson would understand, okay, this amounts to drunk driving. So, if you are prohibiting people who are drunk, finding them in driving, this same rule should be applied, at least the same restriction should be applied to these people during this short period post-exposure. Now, the discussion and conclusions, when you write, our discussion should be revolving or built around our results. So, it is not just another literature review where we summarize different related studies. And we should end the paper with no more than 3-4 key messages. So, if these key messages are compelling enough, the editors would include these interesting ones into the editorial or the synopsis at the beginning of the hard copy, so that those who read the editorial will see your name and go through and read your full article or the abstract at least, so that again your visibility, chances of them citing, reading your article will be high, the impact would be higher. And some journals, like the Elsevier Group journals nowadays, they want you to submit research highlights in a language. Basically, these are the findings of your study, again in lay terms where an educated layperson can understand. So, this will be read not only by your fellow scientists in your research area, but also the health administrators, legislative bodies, and general educated lay people, and also most importantly funding bodies. So, when they go through this, then they will understand this person has done something, not something esoteric, but something really understandable and applicable to the general public. So, your visibility, impact, future funding will be increased. Now, the publication process. Now, the manuscript submission, what we do is usually we circulate the manuscript among our co-authors, that is our practice. So, if I write the paper, I will circulate the soft copy, and I prefer them to give their edits and comments as track changes, so that it will be revised many times. We should check, before submitting, we should check for formatting, the spellings, line spacing, figure resolution, tables and references. One good way to starting point would be the American Medical Association Manual of Style, if it is a medical paper. There is nothing more frustrating to the editors than having a poorly formatted manuscript. Write a compelling cover letter, not only the formalities, but the potential impact of the paper, why they should publish the paper, and why is it relevant to the readership. But keep it to one page. My rule of thumb is the cover letter should be shorter than the abstract. Propose good reviewers. You might have met them in person at the conferences. Perhaps next 3 days you might meet many potential reviewers for your papers, hopefully. And they might be people in other groups working in the subject area in the world or in your country. And you might also pick them from your reference list. If somebody's name is appearing again and again in your reference list, he could be a good researcher. Go to the website and see what they are doing and propose that reviewer in your submission. If by chance, if it goes to this reviewer, he might look at your manuscript favorably because his citation is appearing again and again. So if it is approved, he might get few extra citations also. They would not look at the papers like that. Obviously, they would test the scientific validity of this, but that is another sort of additional icing on the cake, I should say. The revisions, be polite to the editors and the reviewers, and even if you do not agree, you can write a rebuttal, and be specific to responding in reviewers' comments. And importantly, read the final proof carefully. Finally, the publicity plan. As I said earlier, the publishers try to increase the visibility of the papers by encouraging you to submit research highlights, graphical and video abstract, the online version, and free online supplementary material, so that those who approach this supplementary material will definitely refer your paper, cite your paper. Check the sharing policy of the publisher, whether you can submit the preprint copy, what the embargo period is, say 12 months or so, and include the citation, abstract, and if they allow the full paper in your scientific networking sites like the ResearchGate, Google Scholar, and if you have a digital repository in your institution, for example, my institution, I work for Newcastle also, so they have a digital repository called NOAA. And in your soft copy of your CV, include the hyperlink to the PubMed or the full paper so that people can click and straight away go to their paper. And if it is a major clinical finding, you can call press conferences and give your research highlights in the press conference, but please do it only after peer review. So many problems arise when you try to publicize your work before it is being scientifically peer reviewed, so that is not good scientific conduct. So that's all that I wanted to say. So again, to summarize, so we can increase the impact not from the stage of writing, but at the stage of conduct of research. And then I discussed how it can be done at the publication stage and what are the tips for post-publicity plan. Thank you and good luck. I can take maybe a couple of questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Tharaka, for enlightening regarding the most important topic in research itself. I think we can take 2 questions. There are 2 minutes time remaining.
I am Dr. Robin Maske from Nepal. I am an endocrinologist. Thank you for the excellent presentation. My question is like you told like both the speaker like my question. So as you rightly told, there is a time limit in doing the research. But it's a comment and suggestion like we should not, in the research, we should not harm the patient. So you should always believe in not harming the patient. We have to focus on that. And I think all the researchers must have a good clinical practice training, if I am not wrong.
Sorry, I didn't get that last part, sorry.
Good clinical practice training, GCP. So this is for both the clinician and the non-clinician. So I think that should be done. Or if you don't do that GCP training, then you won't be able to do all these things. So how you go ahead. Regarding the high impact paper, how to publish, but how to make the paper high impact? That is the main question for you. And do you believe in all these, the ResearchGate and all those? So how to go ahead? Like, which is how to make it a high impact? Any paper to make a high impact? Like, my research main question is that. And what are the limitations of high impact paper? Like, so these are the questions.
Or the limitations that you come across when you try to do it?
Yeah.
It's again, as I said earlier, there is no kind of foolproof method as to this is what we can do. Particularly if it is clinical research, what I collaborate with certain clinical groups, for example, toxicology group and clinical pharmacology groups. What I would see is, so in that case, I'm not the person who comes into contact with the patient. So I make the collaboration. So as I said, in most of these papers, although they're clinical papers, I am taking up the writing part, so that one good way to do is, if you are a busy clinician, to make collaborations. And then particularly the statistics part, it's extremely difficult. Statistics is a branch of mathematics, so to speak, right? Although we do it in a different way. So one way is make collaborations, and then, because the limit, if there are major methodological limitations, even if it is a clinical journal, they would not take that up, however how much important your research question is. So I think that making collaborations would be a good idea. And also I think these days, in Sri Lanka at least, many clinical groups, clinical societies are taking up, for example, workshops and not really CME programs, but continuing medical education programs. Still they have this kind of programs, and some of them award CME points also for the clinicians, for example, junior doctors, for participating in this kind of work. That would be the way forward, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you.